Hey everyone, welcome back to another chit-chatty video. As you can see by the title, I wanted to talk today about the tearing down of the divine feminine energy. I feel that this is such an important topic to bring up and to talk about and to spotlight because I feel that it's so ingrained in our culture to do this that it's basically become a social norm to disrespect, to put down, and to discard the divine feminine. And this is a huge problem because I think that this is the culprit, the crux, the reason why our world is as corrupt and as divided as it is today. So I think this is something that's really important for us to really talk about and think about so that hopefully as a collective, as a whole, we can come together and bring balance to create a better world, to create a better place. So if you see me looking down here, I do have my notes. So that's what I'm looking at, just to make sure that we cover everything I want to cover today. And so the first thing I want to mention is that when I use the words masculine and feminine energy in this video, I'm not necessarily indicating genders. I will be using a couple of examples where that is the case, but I'll make sure to point that out when I do that, to avoid any confusion. But I do think that this is so much bigger than genders, than like male and female. This is so much bigger than that. It's energetic. So that's the way I want to frame all of this. Okay, so let's get into it. So as most of you probably know, I do live in the United States of America. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today does have to do with, the experience of living here in the Western world. If you are living in another part of the world, I'd love to hear your thoughts, if you agree with this, if this still applies to you, or if you think things are a little bit different where you are. I'd love to know. But here where I am in the Western world, masculine energy is what's celebrated, is what's praised, and is what's encouraged. So masculine energy, it has to do with things that are attained through strategy, through following a plan, a blueprint, a schedule, to achieve a particular outcome. It's usually a process that can be replicated over and over again. It's very goal-oriented and it's very focused on achieving a particular outcome. So some of these accomplishments has to do with making money, making profits, showing numbers. These are the types of things that receive awards and accolades. So things like going to a prestigious like Ivy League school or something, or getting, high education degrees, or achieving some kind of fame, some kind of status, so that you can have access to possessions and material riches and wealth. These things that give you influence, sway, and power. So usually this is the energy that is sought out because this is what's celebrated here. This is what is recognized as success, as being successful, and like what success means to mostly everyone. However, because we do live in a dual world, there is another energy that exists. We can't have masculine energy without having the other side of the coin present too, which is feminine energy. Feminine energy, on the other hand, is relational. It's living, it's alive. So it shifts, it changes. There really isn't any formula or plan or a blueprint that you can apply to it because it's just ever changing. There's so many potentials, so many possibilities that it can shift and form into. So it's not like as rigid and as solid as masculine energy is. Where masculine energy is more of like that doing energy, feminine energy is more of that being energy. It's really nothing that you have to do or plan. It just is what you naturally are, what naturally comes out of you. So again, it is being energy. Feminine energy is receptive, it's open, it flows, it's nurturing, it's compassionate, it's very giving. And this energy is what facilitates connection, what facilitates relationship, what facilitates love, spirituality, spiritual connections, creativity. These are things that you cannot manufacture. These are things that it's either there or it's not, Feminine energy is also very magnetic, and it's also very vulnerable. And as you guys know, vulnerability is a strength. It takes a lot of strength, to be vulnerable and to trust that you will be aligned with your highest and greatest path, and that you will be aligned with what's meant for you without the need to push and control and use all of this force and willpower to make it happen. Feminine energy allows us to be flexible. It's what allows us to communicate with spirit, to commune with God. It's the reason why we experience synchronicities, those magical experiences that give us meaning and purpose and help us feel like there's something greater and deeper that we can connect to. It helps us to pierce beyond the material world that we can touch and see. And it allows us to experience something more. It allows us to step into what's mysterious. And it's just a very beautiful, creative, and expansive energy that, in my opinion, is what gives life magic. It's what makes life magical. It's how we're able to experience that magic. To experience these things, you need to be open. You need to be receptive. And like I mentioned, it's how we relate to God. It's how we create and form a relationship to God, and how we get to know God and how God works, right? And the mysteries of all of that. So here in the Western world, when people go to pursue careers and stuff, usually what they're thinking about is like, how much money am I going to make? I want to pursue a career where I'm going to be guaranteed a good paycheck, right? Maybe status, maybe influence, maybe something that is respected, right? That's kind of like how it is usually approached. That's a very masculine approach. Whereas if you're approaching, your career endeavors through the feminine energy, you pursue something that you're good at, that you feel connected to, that you feel drawn to, that you feel that this is how you can contribute, this is how you can serve. It's like a gift that you have, or something that you feel very passionate about, something that you feel very connected to. And as we know, a lot of feminine careers, they they don't get paid as well as like the more masculine dominated fields. Let me search up really fast feminine careers just to see, because I know, like, for example, like teachers hardly get paid anything, and I know that's like a more female dominated career, and it's so important if you think about it. Like teaching, being a teacher, you're educating the children are our future. Anything that has to do with like shaping a child and supporting a child and nourishing a child is important. It's like, I think, one of the most important jobs we have, yet they don't pay much. So I have a little list here. It says careers that are dominated by women are usually like beauty specialists, speech and language pathologists, preschool, kindergarten teachers, secretaries, administrative assistants, dentists, or hygienists. They said dental hygienists, childcare workers. Again, the dental field is coming up here. Vets, okay, like working with animals. I think that pays well too, right? Interior designing, nurse practitioners, regular nurses, HR. It shows here. And again, these annual average salaries, they're not much. They're like $45,000 for HR. Interior designing is like $60,000 per year. I'm just curious. I know that jobs that, are female dominated, they make less money. Nursing assistants, they make an average of $30,000 a year. Receptionists make an average of $29,000 a year. Secretaries and administrative assistants is about $37,000 per year. Hairdressers, about $29,000 per year. The dental assistants make about $38,000 per year. Childcare workers, about $27,000 per year, which is nothing. Teachers, I know it's like about like $40,000 a year. Okay, I was just curious. Let me go back to my notes. The point is that female dominated jobs, they pay way less than, the more masculine dominated fields. But instead of choosing a career based off of like money and status and power and all of that, it's about like, what is going to work with me? Like, what am I going to be good at? Like, how am I going to best be of service? How can I best contribute to society? And that's usually like not the way that careers are chosen because we live in this world where masculine energy is what's celebrated, is what's encouraged, is what's praised. And so that's why this is the lens that most people operate out of naturally, because they seek that validation, right? So what happens to the feminine energy? The feminine energy that we just discussed, it isn't valued. It's an energy that is absolutely not valued. Instead, what it is it's demonized. Now I'm going to get into some of the examples that I mentioned that have to do with gender here, just so I can bring my point across. Okay, so how is the feminine energy demonized, you ask? Well, the female vehicle or female bodies are inherently considered sinful by a vast majority of people. This definitely is due to the fact that some of the major religions like Mormonism, the Catholic religion, Christianity, these big religions that are widely popular and practiced, they promote purity culture. And purity culture has to do with basically encouraging women to be modest, to cover up their bodies, because again, they perceive the female body to be like inherently sinful and tempting. So they put it on the female to have to cover up so as to not seduce or tempt. And if they do, it's usually their fault. They blame the female for bringing up those feelings within someone else. That doesn't mean that she's purposefully trying to make you feel in those ways. Yet that's the way it's been historically treated. Because female bodies are sexualized, people have negative responses to seeing a female body. Some people can be triggered by beauty. A lot of people are uncomfortable with women showing skin or being sexy. There's a lot of slut shaming that goes on. And a lot of this, I think, comes from like the biblical stories, like the Genesis story of Adam and Eve, which gives the messaging that women are subordinate to men because women came from men. Like they say that Eve was created from Adam, therefore she's inferior. So I think this is a belief that is very deeply ingrained, and it's one that paints women as being evil, inferior, weak, and tempting. And I think because of these beliefs is also the reason why so many women were persecuted as being witches and were literally burned at the stake. This gave them the justification to do that, these beliefs and these teachings that have been ingrained because of this purity culture that exists, which resulted in thousands of women being executed. And as many of us can still see today, this is still a widespread belief that is ingrained in many people today that demonizes women and paints them in this light. Another way that we tear down the divine feminine energy is by objectifying this energy and only wanting to consume it. So again, the female vehicle is often very sexualized, and because of this, people only want to consume it, removing the consideration of the human being, of the human being's wants, needs, considering their well-being and their humanness. Often, women are objectified and not considered at all. Which brings up, the rape culture that exists. Rape is such a big problem in our world. I feel like because a lot of the time women are objectified and not seen as like humans, people feel entitled to female bodies and they just want to take advantage of it without considering like the woman, the human being. I was actually looking at some rape statistics last night. Usually any woman that I meet has experienced, unfortunately, sexual abuse at some point in her lifetime. So I just wanted to look at the statistics of that, and what I found was very disturbing. So it says, in the year ending March 2022, about 798,000 women were raped or sexually assaulted, which is 1 in 30 women. 1 in 2 adult survivors of rape have experienced it more than once, and 1 in 3 adults who are raped experienced it in their home. But estimates for women experiencing child sexual abuse are higher, with 27% of women reporting this experience. According to the World Health Organization, estimates indicate that globally about 1 in 3, which means about 30% of women worldwide, have been subjected to either physical and or sexual intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence in their lifetime. In the United States, 1 out of every 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, an estimated 91% of victims of rape and sexual assault are female and 9% are male. Nearly 99% of perpetrators are male. And then these are some other statistics about sexual violence. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men are sexually assaulted while in college, but more than 90% of sexual assault victims on college campuses do not report the assault. That's something else that I feel like a lot of people don't even report it, because they're embarrassed and stuff. And because like justice is not brought, like it's usually not given. And I also feel like the way it's handled is very, very questionable and reflects a lot of the stuff that we just talked about, like of these beliefs being ingrained. Like a lot of women will say that they feel like they're the victim, obviously, but like the person questioning them, like the police or something, will be like, well, what were you wearing? And like, what did you tell him? How were you acting? Like they just feel like the questions are very, like it's almost like it's making them feel like it's their fault or something. And again, this has to do with, it's so deeply ingrained in our culture and our society. And that's why I feel like a lot of people don't want to report it, because they're not going to get justice anyway. And I just feel like it's something that's very, very mishandled as a whole. But the last one here, it says 13% of women have experienced a sexual assault at some point during their life. And over half of women, which is 53% of women, have been a victim to sexual violence. This is something that is unfortunately very, very common. Like these are crazy, you know what I mean? Like these are crazy numbers. I remember I was once like in this women's circle and there was like about 30 women there, and just this topic came up, like the topic of sexual abuse came up. And it's crazy how like every single woman in that room had been sexually assaulted at some point in her life, and they were like opening up about it and like talking about it. And it just, I don't know, I felt so sick to my stomach. And it was the first time that I saw like how common that is, and like how almost every single woman has some kind of experience, and that's not cool. That's not cool at all. So there is like a very real rape culture that exists, and this has to do with the fact that women are objectified and not considered. So this is just another way in which we tear down the divine feminine. There's this documentary on Netflix that I watched. It was called American Nightmare. I watched it a really long time ago, but one of the main characters in that documentary, she explains her story about like sexual abuse and rape, and how she just felt like it was so mishandled. That's just one example that you can check out. There's another documentary I watched. It's about like, I don't know, I think it was called like Dancing for the Devil or something. It's like a TikTok cult thing that was happening. I think like it was run by some Asian man, and it had to do with these sisters. It's also on Netflix, but the man that was running the whole thing, the whole cult, there's a lot of women, like women that escaped the cult, that survived. They went to the police with rape allegations, and the police were saying like, oh, this isn't enough, like we need more women to come forward so that we can build a case. And I just thought that was crazy, because how isn't just one case enough? Like, why do you need more than just one? It just shows you like how corrupt and horrible rape culture is, and how mishandled it is. And then we have what's called the male gaze. So I did pull up a definition of what the male gaze is, and it says, it's a theory that describes the way women are portrayed in visual arts and literature from a masculine heterosexual perspective that often objectifies them for the pleasure of male viewers. So that's the male gaze. And this male gaze that exists even impacts the way women views themselves, because she's witnessing herself represented through the male gaze or masculine energy versus how she views herself. Therefore, this becomes a subconscious and internalized way of perceiving herself that makes the male gaze not only an external figure, but through this internalization, she now views herself as an object to be consumed. And again, like we said, because masculine energy is what's respected, is what dominates, it's what is praised, it's also what's valued. So that's why the feminine energy tries to conform and tries to fit that mold of, what the male gaze likes. They try to fulfill, whatever current beauty standard or beauty trend that is, because they want to feel validated. Because again, that is what's celebrated. This is what's acknowledged, what's praised. So it's what's valued. And so they want to feel validated. So they try to conform and fit into that mold. And that's probably also why we see plastic surgery or, a lot of younger girls getting work done when they don't need it, trying to mold themselves into these beauty trends and beauty standards because they value male validation. They value what masculine energy likes and finds attractive. And it's a very human thing, because as humans, we just want to be liked. We just want to be appreciated and seen. And it's like, if you don't conform to those standards, to those norms, you literally become invisible. And something else that I find really crazy is, we have all of these people getting work done and altering their appearance to fit some kind of mold because of the pressures of society. And when people notice that they're getting work done, when it's obvious, then they ridicule them and judge them for getting that work done, which I think is a reflection of a cruel society that we've become, and a society that can't connect to their heart, just can't connect to anything, can't connect, period. So therefore they can't be compassionate. This is a result of living in a loveless society. Okay, so moving on to another example of how the feminine energy gets teared down that illustrates my point, has to do with the origin story of America. So the Europeans made their way over to this land that they had discovered, although they hadn't discovered it because this land already had inhabitants living on it, which were the Native Americans. The Native Americans had been here for thousands and thousands of years, so they were doing just fine, surviving and thriving on their own with the way of life that they had. They had a connection, a relationship to the land. They lived harmoniously with the land. They didn't believe the land to be theirs or anyone's. They were aware that the land was a living, breathing organism in and of itself. And they were grateful and thankful for all of the resources that the land provided them. And every time they used the materials that were provided to them by the earth, they prayed and they gave thanks. They were grateful, and they never took more than what they needed. They never wanted to waste anything. They only took exactly what they needed to take. Everything was done very consciously. So they had a very feminine approach to life where, they only took what was available. They had a relationship with the land. They had connection. They were very spiritual. They didn't see the earth and land as something to be owned. They didn't see it as something that belonged to them. They took from it to live, to survive, but they were thankful. They always showed their gratitude. They had a symbiotic relationship with the land, where yes, it was providing for them, but they were also providing for it. They were taking care of it so that it can continue to thrive. They were both getting replenished and nourished, and they understood that circle of life, really beautifully. But the Europeans came and they thought that they were superior. They looked at the Native Americans as being savages. They completely disregarded, their way of life, their customs, their way of doing things. They thought that they were wasting the land because all they could see were money signs, and they felt that they needed to teach the Native Americans how to properly make use of that land instead of trying to understand them and connect with them and learn from them and respect their way of life. You know, they made everything that they had from scratch. Like, they used the lands, the earth, for all of their resources, and they weren't greedy. They didn't take more than what they needed, and when they did take anything, a little piece of wood, you know, to make spoons and forks, anything, they always thanked Spirit. They always thanked God for providing. They learned how to work with the land, how to grow their own food. They learned how to make their own houses, make their own utensils, their own tools, their own healing remedies, medicines. It's a beautiful, beautiful culture, and it was stripped away from them, from the Europeans that came here with that more masculine approach. And they're the ones that came and started wanting to own property and own land. And they came here, and all they did was bring havoc to the Native Americans instead of respecting them and instead of seeing the value in their way of life, in connecting with the land. They saw that as weak. They saw that as useless. And they saw themselves as superior. And then they also brought like the whole monetary system, which the Native Americans, like, that's not their way of life. That's not the way that they operated. That's not the way that they did things, you know? So they didn't have money. So often they had to go into debt. And in order for them to pay off their debts, the Europeans would have them become slaves, basically, in order to pay off debts. And when that wasn't enough to pay off their debts, they then enslaved their children. The Europeans told these Native Americans that they were less than, that they weren't even being treated as people. They weren't allowed to practice their spirituality. They didn't want them to speak their language. They were trying to completely erase them, to completely eradicate them, because their way was something that was misunderstood. Sound familiar? So because the Native Americans inherently had this more feminine approach to life, the masculine energy that the Europeans brought came and dominated and invalidated and minimized the Native Americans and their customs and their way of life. So this is just another example of how, you know, feminine energy is considered weak. It gets lied to, it gets manipulated, it gets invalidated and minimized. It's not considered, it's disregarded. And this has to do with like the literal origins of the United States of America. And I feel like this energy still today is still so widely here, and it's still dominating. And it's like all of these systems that we have currently, like this was the origin story, which is why it's so deeply ingrained. And again, the Europeans felt justified because they thought that they were superior. They thought themselves to be superior because of the religion that they practiced. So can you imagine? They did all of that in the name of God. Like crazy, crazy, crazy. So yeah, that's just another example of how, you know, the female energy gets disrespected, gets demonized, objectified, used, manipulated, how it gets torn down, and how masculine energy has exerted injustices onto feminine energy, and how it continues to do so in all of these micro ways that are so deeply ingrained and that again have become social norm. So instead of disrespecting the divine feminine energy, we need to learn how to respect it, how to acknowledge it. We need to learn how to see that being emotional, sensitive, soft, receptive, this is what facilitates relationships and connections. This isn't weak. This is needed. This force exists for a reason. And we need to stop contributing to disrespecting this feminine energy, and instead we need to embrace it and to encourage it and to nourish it and to allow it to take up space, okay? Because it's because of this feminine energy that we have the ability to love. And it's the reason why we're living in a loveless society, because we've been tearing down this energy and not letting it take up the space that it deserves to take up, the space it's entitled to take up, the space that it deserves. Divine feminine energy is what teaches us how to embrace our uniqueness, and it's what teaches us how to learn to tend to our own individuality. It's what tells us that it's not a one size fits all, that we are all unique. It's what tells us that everything is relational. We have a relationship to everything. Everything nowadays has become transactional. It's like, if science and math doesn't apply to it, then it's not real, then it doesn't exist. And that's just not the truth. Science and math doesn't apply to everything. And it doesn't mean that it's not real. It doesn't make it not real. Okay? So unfortunately, the masculine energy that is running amok is this lower vibrational, immature, debased masculine energy. Because masculine energy is actually a very beautiful energy. You know, masculine energy is what helps us to take right and proper action. It's a very disciplined energy that allows you to control yourself and to not be a danger to feminine energy. Masculine energy has become the biggest threat and enemy to feminine energy when it's supposed to protect it. But instead, it lacks the maturity and the wisdom to do that. It's supposed to be using their masculine superior strength to protect, but the masculine energy is not being used appropriately. We have to learn how to prevent this masculine energy inside all of us from being a predator, from being a menace to feminine energy. And instead, it needs to learn how to be a true protector like it's supposed to be. And this isn't to tear down and to downplay, to look down on masculine energy, because like I said, masculine energy is also very important, and it also is very impressive. It's an energy that is very technical, it's very skill oriented and goal oriented, it wants results. It is a very impressive energy that is worthy of the praise that it gets and the accolades that it gets, and it's worthy of the appreciation. It's worthy of all of these things. It is, again, a very needed energy. The point I'm trying to make is that we need both of them to be seen with equal importance. And we can't just lean too far into one side, into one aspect, and regard one side as superior, because look what it's created. We need to see that feminine energy is just as impressive, just as important, and just as powerful. They are both essential. We have to stop not taking feminine energy seriously, looking at it as smaller, as not carrying as much weight as masculine energy. It's actually very strong, and it's actually very capable. And it's about time that we also learn to appreciate that and celebrate feminine energy and value it. We need to bring balance back, because again, this tearing down of the feminine energy is deeply ingrained into society and into our culture, making it a social norm to tear down. And we all do it. That's why it's not a gender thing. It's so much bigger than that. It's like from the Barbie movie when she's like, men hate women hate women. It's the only thing we can agree upon. And again, I don't want to look at it in like a gender way. It's more like masculine energy in both men and women hates feminine energy and tears down feminine energy and minimizes feminine energy. And as you can see, this has created such a problem. Continuing to tear down feminine energy is the reason why we live in a loveless, transactional, masculine-dominated society that lacks balance, which is why everything is corrupt, which is why everything is so messed up, which is why we see things falling apart right now. It's what's led to capitalism. It's what's led to all of this competition that comes from, religions and political views that divides us. It's also what's led to this black and white thinking that doesn't make room for nuance. And most importantly, it's where this disconnection from God comes from. Not being able to connect to anything deeper than what we can touch and see, thinking that there's only this identity that we have and that there's not anything further, that there's not anything beyond. Placing such a strong emphasis and focus on the material world while disregarding and not considering anything else and building only in this material world is why people become a slave and why people become bound and chained and stuck in a loop, continuously manifesting and creating this cycle that we're experiencing and a part of here today. We need to remember that we are one with Source. before coming here and after coming here, it has and always will connect us to all things. It's what connects us to God source energy. This energy is what aligns us to what's meant for us. It's what puts us in the right place around the right people. It's what merges you with the divine path. But you have to choose it. You have to allow it. You have to let it in. You have to choose to work with it. And I think a really good way that we can start to do that is by, thinking about these things, placing a spotlight on it, so that hopefully we can create more balance and we can create a better world together. So you guys, that's all I have for you today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this? What are other ways that you guys feel the divine feminine energy gets disrespected and mistreated, is being torn down? These were just my thoughts, some examples I put together, because I do think that this is something that we really need to change. I feel like it's so deeply ingrained, and because it's so misunderstood, that's why we have a lot of the issues and a lot of the problems that we have today. So if we can just peel back the layers and dismantle it and truly understand it, I feel that then we can truly make some real changes that are going to make a difference. The difference that we need to see as a collective, as a whole, as a society, so that we can create new social norms. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this. I hope to see you all around here again very soon. Take good care of yourselves and see you in the next one. Bye.